Communication is the transfer of meaning.
As for me, communication is conveying a message from one human being to another.
Communication? I think it's the effective exchange of ideas or values.
Communication is probably the way you understand people or want them to understand you. I guess there are several methods to do that.
The exchange of ideas, either through words, descriptions, symbols, gestures.
You include the human element and the interactive aspect of communication.
It would depend on the context, without a doubt. There's so many variables to develop effective communication, but you definitely want to know your audience, who you're speaking with, and what your method of communicating is, whether it's persuasion or to just get an idea across. That'll completely affect what your communication plan.
Okay, usually I'm really bad writing, but the idea that I also always trying to do is try to bring a lot of image, or try to put even in write the most simplest way to explain what I want to say. Even if I have image or something like that, I try to put it in order to show what I want to say. I try to avoid write a lot. I'm really bad doing that. That's why I'm trying to...
Yeah, you're good. Oh, you're good.
In fact, it depends on the situation, and it depends on what kind of document you want to create. If you're in a working environment and you want to create an internal audit type of document, which is in a specified area, of course I expect the document to involve some kind of jargons, like some kind of business language in it, so that in fact it says that you know the subject and you also communicate the subject with your colleagues and within the group that you are involved in. So if you are creating a document that will be read or that will be communicated to all people, of course you need to avoid some kind of jargons, and you need to make it more understandable and easily readable.
I mean, like, you have to know the question, right? You have to understand properly what the reader wants, or what your colleague asks you to write. At the same time, you have to hit the main points and synthesize it properly, so that your process would be much more organized, and you have to come up with a very good writing.
Yeah, then, as I said earlier, it all depends on the situation and what kind of documents you are trying to create. So if you want to create a document that will be, communicated to all people, not in a specified group, you should just avoid using the jargons, and you should avoid using some specific type of language. You should be very clear, very concise, very direct. So you should be in a way that you should not create a misunderstanding or double meanings of the words. You should really use your language very wisely
and focus more on the vital points of the topic, so that it will be lesser miscommunication. At the same time, you will deliver your message effectively.
So a good document contains, first of all, a key message that is supported by strong arguments, it's delivered in a clear and concise way, and then finally it's understandable by the
Before a presentation, the main thing you have to do is know your audience, so that you can prepare the right tone, set the timing, the way you want to set up the room, in the best way to meet your audience's needs.
I think you have to decide what you want the result of the message to be, and I think you have to understand your audience.
Well, part of it is yourself. You have to think about how you want to stand in front of your audience, think about what you're going to wear, your posture, your tone, make eye contact with the audience, and then you also have to think about when they ask questions, how you're going to handle their questions, where they're going to be seated, and take all of that into account for your presentation.
I think that's pretty subjective. I think it's different for different people, the arguments that work for them. For me, it's important to build like a structured, rational argument. That is what's most convincing to me, but I know that other people are also really persuaded by emotional appeal or by the charisma of the speaker. So again, I think it really comes down to knowing.
It's a very, very challenging concept. When it comes to business, if you're not able to persuade people, people are not going to take us very seriously. So when there's a huge money involved, and plus a lot of responsibility involved, we need to get the things right. And day one, and the first one.
Buy-in. So number one, engaging with the person you're trying to persuade, finding out what it is that their objectives are, what are your objectives, and trying to find a common ground to get them to be interested in what you're persuading them to do. I think number two, it would be good to kind of elaborate on why this is a good idea, give them examples, give details, evidence, and show the facts. Number three, I think it's just to deliver and to bring forward what you promised them, what you said would happen, and show them that you really have the confidence to bring it forward. And you can persuade them.
You have to be confident, charismatic, and give some benefits.
To deliver a persuasive presentation, I believe it has to be exciting, and you have to show that you're passionate about the subject. If you're not passionate about the subject and you're not excited about what you're talking about, you're not going to win anyone over with that. So I think if you have passion for it and you explain it well, also using creativity and
if it is virtual, you need to maintain a very good eye contact, and you need to do a lot of gestures like, moving your hands, making emphasis, explaining things passionately, and making sure you carry the other people, because you can't see them face to face. So you need to carry them along with your body language as well, not just what you say.
Good. Well, I think just to add up to what Tunji just said, we try to engage people the most we can, because sometimes when we're in a meeting like face to face, it's easy to get lost sometimes in a conversation, but when you're doing like virtually, it's really good and important to engage people, ask them questions, direct questions about the subject, what they think, what they thought, what their approach is, and I think that's really good and engaging because it gives you a sense of...
Basics for a meeting. First, the meeting needs to have an agenda. And then we also have to have the facilitator in the meeting have to guide the meeting and make sure it stays on track and doesn't get out of control.
Setting the time, setting the place.
The facilitator, as far as I'm concerned, is supposed to guide the conversation and make sure everyone stays on task.
The facilitator encourages to set the tone of the meeting. Observing the information from the speaker and analyzing his information is just not just receiving information, but also it's a thinking process.
Listening, well, Jen, first let's give thank you to our sponsor. Listening for me is really understanding the person that is talking with you. It's not just listening, is what we saw in class, like deep understanding, deep listening. You have to pay attention to what is given to you, that person. And I think there are many ways to do that. There are many tips that we also saw in class. Like, for example, we need to overcome language barriers, culture barriers.
You have to give feedback, if you want to, and coach only when person asks for that. Okay? If it's not been asked, probably you can offer that, but don't be assertive on giving feedback or coaching.
Well, feedback for me is an amazing tool, let's say it in that way, because it gives the opportunity to the person that you are giving to it, the opportunity to improve or to congratulate what they achieve. And coaching, it's like helping that person to achieve a certain path or a certain objective. It's not just telling him what he or she needs to do, is helping them to achieve that. So that's the big difference between feedback and...
During the hard conversations, usually I put my feelings, put my thoughts together, and it becomes personal. Now I'm working on that to make personal different from the hard conversation, from the topic.
It's better to calm down the waters before and during a difficult conversation, and I think the best is to achieve a win-to-win situation. Though sometimes you will need to give something from your part, and the other person will need to.
Crisis is something that happens beyond the regular operations of a business. So this can include a negative impact on the operations of the business, which includes the people, equipment, the facilities, the finances, the brand of the company.
A crisis can be something which is completely outside of the control of your business. I found that subject quite interesting because it showed you how you can actively manage a crisis. You can react, you can be proactive about it, you can keep the situation in control.
So an example for a crisis that wasn't well managed, in my opinion, would be United. If you go to YouTube and just write down United, you see the second one that comes up is Breaks Guitars. A guy who didn't have his guitar refunded after it was broken posted a song and basically brought the stock price down to the value of about 60,000 guitars. And United were just shocked. They did not really treat it.
So, in order to prepare for a crisis, it's important to have a plan. And the plan should consist of these following items. Consider the threats and how to deal with them, scenarios, what-ifs, nightmare cases, determine early warning signs, appoint a crisis team, develop a crisis plan,
and maybe it's more about how to understand cultural differences and how to be aware of them in order to, before presenting something to them or just before giving a speech, just be aware of what they are expecting, what are the culture, what are the language, also how to use body language, that is important too, and just more like to be aware and culture on them and try to research more about it, because if you are, I don't know, we did in our group presentation that if you go to other countries and you don't know them, maybe you lose your business or you're not good.
So while I was studying at Hult, I learned that for different cultures it is different, they have different understanding of being on time. So for some people being on time means being exactly, for example, at 5 p.m. as they have a meeting, or for someone it is okay to wait for 15 minutes or 30 minutes or to be late for this time. But so for some cultures, if you invite people at your home for like a party, they will come like 2 hours later.
So when you are making jokes, you should be aware to who are you talking to, because some people don't understand or could be offended what I say.
There are intercultural differences, obviously. I mean, things that you do in one culture that will be acceptable and here not acceptable in another culture. For example, proximity. Some cultures, if you're very close to each other, they find it rather strange and they're not comfortable with it. Meanwhile, other cultures are better off getting close to each other.
About ambiguity, actually it depends on the structure that you're working for, because for me, for example, in places where, for example, I work in banking, I cannot be ambiguity, I cannot talk to clients having two different perceptions. It needs to have one clear with clear process. While maybe under circumstances where you need to be creative and you need to come up with different solutions, so be flexible, ambiguity is really important as to have that flexibility in order to achieve results.